Hi, my name's Andrew John Rainnie, and I am the writer of Spirits of Vengeance, The Stone of Spirits. It's my debut fantasy novel. It's available now on ebook, on Amazon, iTunes, Barnes & Noble, and Smashwords, also on Google Play, and it will soon be available as a paperback being printed by CreateSpace. Now, I've been doing a number of these blogs, but this one is going to focus on names and places. So it's the names of the places that you visit in the book, and also the characters and the animals and objects that you'll find in the book. So I'll show you first a map of the two different continents. So the first map that I'm going to show you is the map of Amoros. So it's the western continent, and it's very much got a European feel. Some of the countries are mashups or based on European countries, such as the area of Hiroshima to the northwest is very Nordic. It's very kind of Viking culture, and so I used a lot of H's, hard sounding consonants to get that feel. Also looked into Nordic mythology and used some of the names of their gods as characters, whereas you have the southern country of Caspia, and that's meant to be representative of the southern countries in Europe. It's got a very Italian Roman vibe. It's not a kingdom like Hiroshima is. It's more of a republic where they have the council and so on and so forth. The other country you will see is Rundale to the west. That's an area that I wanted to kind of give a bit of an American feel. So half the country is populated by the centaurs, and half of the country is populated by the native tribes of the Atreyu. There's 4 native Atreyu tribes, and they go from the peaceful to the very savage, but they live in Runhale in an uneasy coexistence. There's the centre country of Lagoria, which used to belong to the elves before they retreated into Elgin Forest. So it's slowly been taken over by man. There's a couple of towns there, but there's nothing as big as the centuries-old cities of the other countries. And then right at the top you'll find Maitor. Maitor is kind of like a no man's land. It's a very harsh land. The landscape's very bleak and dark, but people have lived there and continue to live there, and they survive, and that's the whole point of that country. It's to show the history of it, and to show that people won't just leave a country if they've grown up there for centuries. They'll continue to till the land, even if it's futile. Now, moving on to the other continent of Zelestia, and I wanted to give that the opposite feeling of what we had in Amoros. So Amoros begins with an A, I began Zelestia with a Z, and I based it very much around a kind of African culture. So Zelestia isn't broken into countries, it's one big giant continent. It's very exotic to the people of Amoros, but there are still factions within it, as well as the main citadel of Zathru, which takes up quite a bit of the main continent. There are also the Zofifi Islands to the south, and they've got a very kind of Southeast Asian vibe to them. But we don't really see much of them in the first book, but hopefully that will change in the sequel. And then you also have the Jalanari jungles. So the jungles are vast, very thick, dense forests and jungles that envisages as kind of the Amazon. So this is areas where there's still tribes and people who haven't met each other. They are that big. Then to the east of Zathru we have the Darosa Desert, and it's essentially the dry wastes that lay beyond the country. So the Zelestians believe that the deserts were once jungles that were then burned by Azik, who was once the god of joy, but he betrayed his mother goddess Gianna, who's the mother of all the gods, and killed his father Igoras, and then burned the lands when she tried to banish him. So that's the kind of rough mythology of the landscape itself. Now, when you're looking at the maps, you might recognise some of the names. It's because I've taken some names from Earth and just translated them or changed them slightly to match the countries I was putting them in. So you've got the Zofifi Islands, which are like Koh Phi Phi in Thailand. You have a small mining town of Kaposi, which is named after the silver mining town Potosi in Bolivia. Now, then moving on to the characters themselves, there's reasons why I've chosen the character names as I have. The one that I took the most pain over was the main character, Callaghan Tor, because I wanted something that was very noble, that suggested he was a knight and the warrior that he is, and I was trying to give it something of a Galahad type feel from Camelot. Ended up going through various versions of the name Galahad and mixing it up with other things, and I eventually chose Callahan, just because he has a bit of a dark past, and I like this. Callaghan is the surname of Dirty Harry Callahan, played by Clint Eastwood. Then there's other characters whose names come from words from our language. So Lord Malinek comes from the Mal word Mal, meaning bad in Latin. Fans of Firefly will know that. Then for the two main characters of Caden, Kamina, Eloeth, I wanted the name Caden. That had been in a very early draft and I liked the sound of it, so I made his sister match it with the K sound. Then there was places like Mount Ishkava. So Ishkava is a Scottish Gaelic word. It's spelt very differently from how it is in my book, but it literally means water of life, which is what we call whiskey, and that's where the word comes from there. And that'll play into the second and third book a bit more as we delve into the creation of the world and the gods that we find in it. There's also a number of references to Tolkien and his language Sindarian, which he invented. So some of the names of the boat, for example, the Arad Nor, translates as Dayrun, which was a rough translation of the Dawn Treader from C.S. Lewis's the Chronicles of Narnia. Then there's other smaller characters like Ramiro Messer, who's one of the ambassadors once we get to Callisto, and just his surname Messer was just because he interferes, he messes with the plot, literally. And there's another character who's a Cyclops magician called Oldwin Blake. Now, Oldwin used to be called something completely different. It was very Japanese style wording that I wanted to use. I wanted to use something very and completely different from anything else in the book. But as I developed Oldwin's backstory for the sequels, I realised that wasn't going to work, so I had to pick something else, and I ended up going with Oldwin, which simply means old one, and Blake, named after William Blake, one of my favourite poets. Then there are some nods to some video games, because I'm a big video game player and video games journalist. So one of the characters we meet earlier on is called Link Rallis, named after the Link in Legend of Zelda. He has a boat called the Tepina, which is like the horse Epina from that game series. There's also the river Ico, which is named after Team Ico and their first game, Ico. They later made Shadow of the Colossus, and we're still waiting on The Last Guardian. We're still waiting, Team Ico, please hurry up. And there is Armin Zool, who's named after both the bad guy in Captain America and also the old Amiga classic game, Zool. And there's also Captain Pike, Braden Pike, who captains the Arid Nor on the way to Celestia. He's named after Captain Christopher Pike from Star Trek. So these are just some of the ways I get to name the characters. I like to inject a bit of pop culture into them, a bit of everything. Sometimes when I'm naming characters, if I think they're from a specific country or background, then I'll use Google Translate to just translate a word that I want them to mean. It's a very good tool, and it gives it a very worldly feel. So with Google Translate you can use very unheard of languages or very small languages to kind of add a worldly theme to your book. So if you're writing a big epic fantasy, it might be something you'd like to do, like me. Anyway, so that's where some of the names and places in my book come from. I hope you've enjoyed looking at the maps and hearing some more about the book itself. Next time I'm going to be moving on from the book and talking a bit more how I went from the finished article to getting it published on the ebooks and on CreateSpace. So it'll be a bit more technical. It'll be for writers and aspiring authors who are perhaps struggling with the process of moving their self-published work onto those platforms. So I'll be trying to help you out a bit there, because this is the second time I've done it, so I've got a bit of a hang of it now. So until then, my name is Andrew John Rainnie, and I hope you've enjoyed the blog post. Thanks.